When the fires of Ocoee finally died down, a chilling silence fell over the land. The smoke cleared to reveal not just the skeletons of homes and churches, but the ghost of a community. The violence of November 1920 was swift and brutal, a maelstrom of fire and blood designed to eradicate a people from their homes. But the attack on Black Ocoee didn't end when the last flame was extinguished. A second, quieter, and perhaps more insidious wave of destruction was just beginning. It was a war waged not with guns and torches, but with fountain pens, legal stamps, and court orders. They didn't just burn Ocoee, they took the deeds, they stole the land. The very ground that generations had worked, the foundation upon which they had built their lives and dreams, was systematically stripped away. And while the perpetrators of the violence hid behind the anonymity of a mob, the beneficiaries of the theft that followed were not so careful. They left a trail, a paper trail. In the dry, brittle pages of Orange County's archives, in the looping cursive of a 100-year-old ledger, the story of this grand larceny is written in black and white. This is the story of how the wealth of an entire community was laundered through a corrupt legal system. And the paper tells us who got rich. The first and most prominent name in this tragic ledger is July Perry. A prosperous landowner, a respected community leader, and a deacon, Perry was a symbol of Black success in Ocoee. He had dared to help his neighbors register to vote, an act of defiance that made him a primary target of the mob. After he was captured, brutalized, and lynched, his body left hanging as a warning, the local court system stepped in, not to find his killers, but to dispose of his property. In a move that drips with cruel irony, the court appointed a man to manage his estate, a man who embodied the very ideology that had just murdered him, a Confederate veteran named Bluford Sims. Sims, a former soldier of the Confederacy, was now the legal guardian of a murdered Black man's legacy. The court charged him with the fiduciary duty to protect the assets of the estate for the benefit of Perry's heirs, his widow Estelle and their children who had fled for their lives. It was a legal fiction from the start. The fox was not just guarding the henhouse. He had been handed the keys by the farmer himself. Sims quickly went to work liquidating Perry's holdings. And on one of the deeds he processed, a document transferring Perry's hard-earned land, sat one chilling line, a stark reminder of the new reality in Ocoee. It was a restrictive covenant, a poison pill baked into the legal description of the land itself, cannot be sold to a Negro. The very ground July Perry had owned was now legally forbidden to people who looked like him. It was the ultimate act of erasure, ensuring that even if his family returned, they could never reclaim their home. And what of the proceeds from these sales? What of the money owed to his grieving family? July. Perry's descendants have been unequivocal for a century. His daughter Caritha, who was a child when she fled the massacre, stated it plainly her entire life. Perry's family said they never saw a penny. Not 1 cent from the land their father had bled and died for ever made it to his wife and children. It vanished into the pockets of the white establishment of Orange County. So who got the land? Then came the buyers. Following the paper trail, a comprehensive legal review traced a significant portion of July Perry's prime real estate, including his homestead, straight into the hands of a powerful local white politician and former state senator J. Maxwell Scott. Scott and other prominent white citizens acquired the land for fractions of its actual worth, profiting directly from the murder and terror that had cleared the way. The story repeats itself with sickening regularity. The Hamiter family, another prosperous Black family in Ocoee, owned valuable land with thriving citrus groves. Their property, their legacy, their future, gone too. The records show it was sold off for just $10.
$10? For a life's work? For the sweat of my father and his father before him? For the trees we planted, the well we dug, the home we built with our own hands? It's not a sale. It's a punchline to a tragedy. It's the price of our fear.
Consider the case of Rosa Eady. She was a landowner, a taxpayer, a citizen. In 1908, years before the violence, Rosa Eady bought her land fair and square. She held the title, a clear and legal claim to her piece of Ocoee. But the paper trail reveals a cold, hard truth. 29 months after the massacre, in March of 1923, her deed suddenly carried another man's name, John Butler, a white man who was part of the mob that terrorized Ocoee. There's no record of a legitimate sale, no evidence that Rosa Eady ever consented or was fairly compensated. One day, the land was hers. The next, it belonged to one of the men who had helped drive her out.
I signed nothing. I sold nothing. They burned my neighbor's house. They took my husband's vote. And then they took my land. My name on paper? That was my proof. His name in the ledger? That was his power. The paper only tells the story the powerful want told.
These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a coordinated campaign of ethnic cleansing and economic plunder. Between 1921 and 1925, in the years immediately following the massacre, deed after deed shifted out of African American hands. The pattern was brutally simple. A black family was terrorized into fleeing, abandoning their property. Soon after, a white administrator, often appointed by the same court system, would declare the property abandoned and sell it for a pittance to a well-connected white buyer. Families fled under constant, unrelenting threat. The initial terror of the massacre never truly subsided. It lingered in the air, a promise of renewed violence if anyone dared to stay, let alone return. They left with what they could carry, believing they might one day come back. But the system was designed to make sure they had nothing to come back to. The paperwork kept moving, a silent, efficient engine of dispossession, even when the people could not. The land, once a source of pride and independence for a thriving black community, was absorbed piece by piece into the white-owned economy of Central Florida. And what of Bluford Sims, the Confederate veteran entrusted with July Perry's estate? The court, in a rare and feeble gesture toward procedure, ordered Sims to file a final accounting of his administration of the Perry estate. This document would have been the key, a detailed record of every asset sold, every dollar received, and every payment made to the heirs. The court ordered him to file it. He never did. There is no balance sheet. There is no record of payment. The official court file simply goes cold. The absence of that document is a confession. It is a monument to the conspiracy of silence that allowed the theft to occur without consequence. It is just silence where justice should have been.
Mercy, Lord, they write what they want to write. They sign what they want to sign. That paper don't speak for us, it speaks for them. It tells their story, their victory, our story. Our story is in the wind, it's in the soil they took.
In the face of dozens of deaths, a community burned to the ground, and the complete displacement of over 500 citizens, the official response was a deafening silence. No one ever faced trial for the murders or the arson. A local grand jury was convened, but its conclusion was a foregone conclusion. After a cursory investigation, it declared there was no evidence to procure any indictments. The evidence was everywhere, in the ashes, in the empty homes, in the fresh graves. But the jury refused to see it. The failure wasn't just local. Word of the Election Day violence reached Washington. The nascent Bureau of Investigation, the forerunner to the FBI, was aware of the events. Federal agents did in fact visit Florida. For the fleeing survivors, this might have been a flicker of hope, the possibility of federal justice. But that hope was quickly extinguished. The agents' mandate was shockingly narrow. They were sent only to ask about potential violations of federal voting rules. They were not there to investigate the lynchings, not the dozens of murders, not the widespread arson that destroyed a community, and certainly not the systematic, state-sanctioned theft of an entire people's wealth. The system, at every level, from the county courthouse to the halls of Washington, D.C., had looked the other way. The message was clear. In Ocoee, there would be no justice. There would only be impunity. Property isn't just dirt. It's the relay baton of wealth. Land ownership is the cornerstone of American prosperity, a tangible asset that grows, a foundation for the future. It's collateral for a business loan, the key to funding a child's education. This transfer is like a relay race, where each generation passes on more security to the next, giving them a crucial head start. When families are forced out, their children start the race farther back. For Ocoee's black families, the loss of their land was a catastrophic economic reset. Stripped of their primary asset and legacy, they lost the ability to build and pass on wealth. Their children and their children's children were forced to begin from a significant deficit, while others advanced their prosperity built on the very land that was stolen. In Ocoee, the paper trail explains gaps we still see today. This isn't ancient history, it's a living economic reality. The documents, deeds, tax records, tell a clear story of stolen opportunity. They map the direct line from the violence of 1920 to the persistent racial wealth gap. The economic echoes of that single event have compounded over a century, creating disparities that continue to affect the descendants of those who were driven out. The loss was not temporary. Its impact has been permanent and profound. For 100 years, the story of Ocoee was a ghost, buried by official silence. But in 2020, a century after the massacre, that silence was officially broken. The Florida legislature passed House Bill 1213, a landmark law mandating that the history of the Ocoee Massacre be taught in all Florida public schools. It was a declaration that this history matters, that the names of the victims and the stories of the exiled would no longer be footnotes but required reading. This act of legislative memory aims to inoculate future generations against the amnesia that had plagued the state, ensuring the lessons of Ocoee about the fragility of democracy and the cost of racial violence would be confronted. Alongside the educational mandate came a powerful symbolic gesture. The governor of Florida officially proclaimed November 2nd as Ocoee Remembrance Day. On paper, a simple declaration. In practice, the state formally acknowledging a dark chapter it had long ignored, transforming a date of terror into a day of solemn reflection. This official recognition paved the way for institutions like the Orange County Regional History Center to bring the story to the forefront. They expanded their exhibits, creating a permanent space dedicated to the massacre. It was no longer a hidden history, but a central part of the region's public memory, a place for visitors to come face to face with the evidence. Perhaps the most groundbreaking tool for truth-telling was digital. Historians at the History Center undertook the monumental task of tracing the theft of land, property by property. They painstakingly combed through a century of deeds, tax rolls, and court records, digitizing the paper trail of dispossession. The result is a powerful, interactive deed map. With a click, anyone can see the thriving Black community of 1920s Ocoee, the homes, the churches, the groves. With another click, you can see the moment the ledger breaks, following the chain of title to the exact transaction where a Black family's property was transferred into white hands, often for pennies on the dollar. It makes the abstract crime of land theft devastatingly concrete. Names on paper make truth visible. But acknowledgement is not atonement. The ledger doesn't just show what was broken, it presents a moral invoice. The conversation has now shifted from remembrance to repair. Justice means fixing what the ledger broke, title correction where possible, scholarships where not. It's an attempt to restore the stolen potential, the lost generational wealth, and the educational opportunities extinguished in 1920. These are the first steps on a long road. The laws have been passed, the truth has been mapped. But the real work of repair and reconciliation, that's the work left undone. Next, what repair could look like, Part 3.